Welcome back to Outside Views. Today we're diving into a rather unexpected political twist. Boris Johnson, the man who once aligned himself enthusiastically with Donald Trump, has now turned around and launched a blistering critique of the new US president. Yeah, even Boris Johnson is attacking Donald Trump. And that says a lot about how far things have changed. And as always, I want to be clear with you, I'm not British myself, and I believe Brexit was a terrible mistake. That's why I have the name Outside Views. And that mistake, championed by Johnson and praised by Trump, continues to shape the political landscape. So when Boris Johnson publicly distances himself from Trump, it's more than just a personal shift. It's a reflection of deeper cracks among those who once stood united under the populist banner of Brexit and Trumpism. But let's unpack what happened. In recent weeks, Donald Trump initiated talks with Vladimir Putin in a highly publicized attempt to broker a ceasefire in Ukraine. And Trump's allies had high hopes. And Boris Johnson was no exception. Just days before the talks concluded, Johnson boldly predicted that Trump would deliver. He said, "I trust and believe Trump will hit Putin with every shot in his locker." But then reality hit, and the outcome was far from what Johnson had anticipated. Putin rejected an unconditional ceasefire. He dismissed the talks and doubled down on his military objectives in Ukraine. And in response, well, Boris Johnson erupted. On social media, Johnson declared, "Putin's rejection of an unconditional ceasefire is shocking." He went further, accusing the Russian leader of using the negotiations to bomb and kill innocent Ukrainians. But then came the bigger shift. Johnson openly criticized Donald Trump. He didn't name Trump directly in every sentence, but the implication was clear. He said, "Putin is laughing at us." He accused the negotiations of being a farce. He said the talks had achieved nothing. And that, by implication, was a direct shot at the man who led them, Donald Trump. But now, let's be honest, this isn't something Boris Johnson does lightly. You know Johnson, and Johnson and Trump have long shared a political style, blustery, populist, anti-establishment. They praised each other openly. They supported similar policies. And for years, Johnson went out of his way to align himself with Trump's global worldview. So why the sudden rupture? Why is Boris Johnson now distancing himself? The answer lies partly in the spectacle of failure. Trump's negotiations with Putin didn't just fail, they made Putin look stronger. And Russian media celebrated. Putin was portrayed as dominant. And even former Russian President Medvedev mocked Western leaders. And instead of delivering peace, the talks emboldened Russia. Putin even suggested a US-Russia ice hockey match, a ridiculous gesture clearly aimed at portraying Russia as just another friendly, sports-loving country. It was classic authoritarian image management what we saw there. But it worked, at least for domestic audiences. And Johnson saw it for what it was, a propaganda victory for the Kremlin. So Johnson spoke up. He criticized the process. He criticized the outcome. And by extension, he criticized Trump, because his entire diplomatic mess had Trump's fingerprints all over it. And Johnson's own legacy is tied to Ukraine. As Prime Minister, he was among the first European leaders to offer strong vocal support for Ukraine after Russia invaded for the second time. And his political brand became linked to resistance against Putin. So to watch Trump fumble an opportunity to stand firm against Moscow, well, that was too much. Johnson couldn't stay silent. And he wasn't alone. A number of other conservatives, many of whom once stood firmly in Trump's corner, have started to question his judgment. They see the shifting political winds. They recognize that Putin is escalating again. And they worry that Trump's appeasement approach is playing directly into Russia's hands. And meanwhile, voices like Priti Patel have rushed to Trump's defense on the other side. She claimed that Trump had made very significant points consistently. She applauded his push for greater European defense spending. And she downplayed his outrageous comments, like falsely accusing Zelensky of being a dictator for not holding elections during wartime, which the Constitution states they can do. But let's be clear. Trump's rhetoric is dangerous. Calling the leader of a democratic country a dictator while that country is under siege is not just wrong. It's irresponsible. It emboldens autocrats. It undermines democratic values. And it's exactly the kind of disinformation Putin thrives on. And that's what makes Boris Johnson's criticism so striking. Because for all his flaws, and I talked a lot about them, and there are many, Johnson recognizes the danger. He knows that soft paddling with Putin doesn't work. And even he couldn't defend Trump's failure in this case. And it also shows us something about the limits of loyalty in politics. Boris Johnson was loyal to Trump for years. He parroted his rhetoric. He echoed his style. He benefited politically from aligning himself with the American president. But even for Johnson, there's a line. A surprise, I know. And in this case, the line was Ukraine. And that tells us that even populists have political red lines, especially when their legacy is at stake. Johnson built part of his political reputation around defending Ukraine. His speeches, visits to Kiev, and weapon shipments all form part of his post-Brexit global image. So when Trump misjudged Putin, failed to get results, and let Russia walk away with a narrative win, Johnson had to react. It's also a revealing moment for Trump. He wants to portray himself as the master negotiator, the deal maker, the leader who can end wars. But once again, reality gets in the way. His talks with Putin didn't deliver peace, they delivered propaganda. And Johnson, sensing the political danger of being tied too closely to a failed Trump initiative, broke ranks. It's just damage control. But it's also something more. It's a sign that the post-Brexit pro-Trump axis is weakening. And if Johnson is willing to criticize Trump publicly, others may follow. We are now in a phase where Brexit's political champions are scrambling to stay relevant. Their world is fragmenting, and Trump is mired in scandals and campaign chaoses. Johnson has been pushed out of office and remains politically adrift, and the promises of Brexit have never materialized. And public faith in populist narratives is waning in the UK. And so criticism becomes a survival strategy. Johnson criticizes Trump to retain credibility. Others defend Trump in hopes of keeping their populist base. And in the background, Putin watches and manipulates. And the geopolitical consequences are serious here. Because while Western politicians argue over failed diplomacy, Ukraine continues to suffer. Civilians die. Homes are destroyed, and authoritarian regimes gain ground in the global information war. And we must understand the real danger here. When Western democracies fracture internally, autocracies win. When political leaders choose posturing over policy, lives are lost. And when allies like Trump and Johnson start to fracture, it's not just a media story. It's a sign of deeper instability. We've reached a point where even Boris Johnson, a staunch populist and vocal Trump admirer, feels compelled to draw this line. He has seen that Trump's approach to Russia and Ukraine is not just ineffective, it's dangerous. And that makes this moment more than just political theater. It is a warning. And that's it for today's episode. But what do you think about Boris Johnson's shift? Is it sincere? Is it strategic, or is it just damage control? So please let me know your thoughts in the comments below the video. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as you know, this is Outside Views, where we keep questioning what others accept. See you next time, and the next video is right here in the end screen.